This is a violation of a decades-old arrangement covering one of the most sensitive sites in the Middle East. Online pictures show Itamar Ben Gvir has been sanctioned by the UK government, appearing to lead Jewish prayers at the compound with Israeli settlers, and the compound itself is known by Jews as the Temple Mount. Under the status quo arrangement, Jews can visit the site but not pray, which Muslims see as a major provocation.
August 2025, far-right Israeli National Security Minister Itamar Ben Gvir led Jewish prayers atop the Temple Mount on Tisha B'Av, defying decades of agreed protocols. The Temple Mount, Har HaBayit, is Judaism's holiest site, the location of Solomon's first temple and Herod's second temple, and Islam's third holiest sanctuary, home to the Al-Aqsa Mosque and Dome of the Rock. Historically, Jerusalem's Temple Mount has been sacred to both Jews and Muslims. According to the Hebrew Bible, King Solomon built the first temple there around 957 BCE, destroyed 587 BCE, and the second temple stood from 516 BCE, renovated by Herod, until its destruction by Rome in 70 CE. Orthodox Judaism teaches that a third temple will one day be built at this location in the Messianic era. For this reason, many religious Jews consider the Mount supremely holy, and rabbinic law forbids Jews from entering its most sacred areas, lest they unintentionally trespass on the former Holy of Holies. Normally, under the long-standing status quo arrangement, Jews may visit the compound under police escort, but are forbidden to pray there. By openly reciting the Amidah prayer and allowing large-scale singing and prostration, Ben Gvir's visit marked an unprecedented breach of this understanding. The Temple Mount, called Haram al-Sharif by Muslims and Har HaBayit by Jews, is perhaps the most sacred real estate on earth. It is the spot where Solomon's ancient first temple and Herod's majestic second temple once stood, razed by Babylon in 587 BCE and by Rome in 70 CE. For millennia, it has been the fulcrum of spiritual longing and prophetic vision. Now, in this charged twilight, history itself seems to teeter on the brink. In 1967 Six-Day War, Israeli authorities have upheld a delicate status quo at the Temple Mount. The Islamic Waqf, a Jordanian religious foundation, administers the site, which is home to the Al-Aqsa Mosque and the Dome of the Rock. Under this arrangement, Jews and other non-Muslims may visit the sacred compound during specified hours, but they are not permitted to pray or make religious displays. For decades, this unwritten agreement was vigilantly enforced. Even a whisper of Jewish prayer on the Mount could once mean arrest or being barred from the site. These long-standing rules, affirmed by Israel and Jordan in peace treaties, have been the linchpin of a brittle calm on this hallowed ground. On May 26, 2025, Jerusalem Day, marking the reunification of the city, National Security Minister Itamar Ben Gvir became the first Israeli cabinet minister in modern history to climb the Temple Mount and pray. Flanked by aides and fellow activists, he gave thanks. Today, thank God, it is possible to pray on the Temple Mount, to bow down on the Temple Mount. We thank God for that. The scene shocked many. Flags fluttered, worshippers sang hymns, and videos captured moments that had been unimaginable only months earlier. According to reports, these Jerusalem Day visits drew sharp criticism from Palestinian leaders and neighboring states even. His office insisted that Israel's policy toward the Mount had not changed and will not change. Still, the precedent had been set. The silence that once hung over this mountain was beginning to crack. 3 weeks later, on June 27, 2025, Ben Gvir quietly issued a new directive to the police. Jewish prayer, singing, and even dancing would be allowed across the entire Temple Mount. That day, Jewish visitors were openly permitted to sing and dance throughout the compound, a historic break from past practice. Newspapers noted that this reversed decades of enforcement under which any overt religious expression by Jews, even a whispered prayer, could once trigger arrests or detentions. Police Commissioner Levy was reportedly told not to restrict Jewish singing on any part of the Mount. In effect, the Mount's ancient stones seemed to break their centuries-old silence and welcome the sound of psalms and song. On August 3, 2025, Tisha B'Av, the fast day mourning the destruction of both temples, became the stage for an historic upheaval. Ben Gvir, accompanied by fellow nationalist ministers, ascended the Temple Mount and openly led the Amidah prayer with a group of worshippers. This was unprecedented. A serving Israeli minister blatantly violating the decades-old status quo by praying at the Al-Aqsa compound. Official tallies show a record 3,527 Jewish pilgrims ascended the Mount that day, a 32% increase over any previous record. Videos from the Mount that afternoon were extraordinary. Men prostrating themselves toward the foundation stone, women singing Hatikvah with Israeli flags, and small groups dancing in devotion under the Jerusalem sun. Even the Prime Minister's office was forced to respond, insisting the status quo had not changed and will remain unchanged. But on the ground, police officers largely stood aside. Fast day in the Jewish calendar had become, in Ben Gvir's words, a day when, thank God, it is possible to pray on the Temple Mount. Across the Middle East, Ben Gvir's actions triggered fury and fear. The Palestinian Authority decried the visit as a dangerous escalation that had crossed all red lines. Jordan, the official custodian of Al-Aqsa under international agreements, condemned the move as an unacceptable provocation, flatly reiterating that Israel has no sovereignty over the blessed Al-Aqsa Mosque. Saudi Arabia's foreign ministry likewise condemned in the strongest terms the repeated provocative practices by Israeli officials and warned that such acts fuel conflict in the region. Even the United States joined the call for calm. The State Department warned that any unilateral change to the holy site status quo was unacceptable and could jeopardize efforts toward a ceasefire in Gaza. Inside Israel, the response split sharply. Ultra-Orthodox parties and religious leaders reacted with alarm, warning that allowing Jewish prayer on the Mount was tantamount to throwing a match into an oil well. Some demanded their Haredi representatives quit the government, arguing the move violated ancient halakha. Shas Minister Moshe Arbel branded Ben Gvir's statements blasphemy, recalling the chief rabbinate's ruling that Jewish prayer at the site was forbidden for generations. By contrast, right-wing and settler groups hailed the change as the restoration of Jewish rights. Otzma Yehudit MK spoke triumphantly of sovereignty and full freedom of worship at the site. Even some Likud ministers echoed these sentiments, declaring that if Muslims may pray anywhere in Jerusalem, Jews should be allowed to pray everywhere as well. The political earthquake was clear. For some Israelis, this was a moment of national pride and prophetic promise. For others, it was dangerous overreach inviting catastrophe. For many religious Zionists, these events seem to resonate with ancient prophecies. The Hebrew Bible foretells a future third temple on this very mount, and today a small but vocal movement is openly preparing for that possibility. The Temple Institute, for example, keeps ready sets of ritual vessels and has even promoted breeding of the red heifer needed for purification rites. A leading newspaper recently noted that building a third temple here, once a fringe idea, is now a topic of heated debate in Israel. Across the ocean, some evangelical Christians likewise watch anxiously. They view the Temple Mount as central to end-time scenarios and see in these acts signs of the approaching Messianic era. Whether one reads those biblical visions literally or not, no spiritual observer can doubt that every stone shifted on this mountain is carried in the language of Scripture. The dust of the mountain has settled, but the questions remain. Jerusalem stands at a threshold, half in shadow, half in light. To many Israelis, it feels like a divine vindication. To many Palestinians and Muslims, it feels like an existential threat. Will the fragile status quo endure, or has the balance been irrevocably altered? In the stillness that follows, history quietly watches. For centuries, prophets listened for the voice of these stones, and perhaps in the events we have seen, we are starting to hear their reply. The holy mountain endures, and as night turns to dawn, all the world looks on to see what daybreak will bring.